put the question about Passover. He asked very simply, Mazot, what is this? What is this all about? The events are so overwhelming that they confuse him. Such a son requires a simple answer, one that will impress him immediately. Say to him very simply, Passover proves the power of God, who brought us out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage.
The immature son is the fourth son. He hardly knows how to ask a question, and he must be treated tenderly. Assist him by offering to answer the questions which are surely in his mind, but which he is unable to articulate. Speak to him in personal terms and say, this holiday of freedom is being celebrated by each of us because that which the Lord did for me when I came forth out of Egypt. Remind him that he too counts and that the redemption was meant for him along with everyone else.
2 millennium ago, the wise men of Israel asked a question about the Passover tradition and searched for meaning in its ritual, as did the wise son of Agadah. Indeed, such was the custom of all thoughtful Jews through history. They told and retold, acted and reenacted, always finding new meaning in it. Ma.
Long ago, during the first century, 5 great scholars and sages of both noble and humble backgrounds sat around the Seder table at daybreak and Passover Eve and read the words of the Haggadah, deliberating over their meaning. The Romans had destroyed the temple and were ruling Palestine with the arm of a tyrant, reminiscent of the bondage of Egypt. And also it was its violation of Roman decree to study, to tackle. They sat there, these great scholars, mindful of the hours that was there flying by.
Betty.
Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, a venerated scholar, was there. In his youth he had bathed in the luxury of his wealthy father's estate. But then, despite his father's protestations, the desire to study grew on him, and he left his comfortable home and made his way to the academies of learning in Jerusalem.
Martha.
Next to him sat Rabbi Joshua ben Hananiah, the most unattractive of men and one of the poorest. He had eked out a pitiful livelihood as a needlemaker. Despite the mockery vented upon him, he was cheerful and tolerant of all people. Unlike Rabbi Eliezer, who was militant in his opposition to Rome, Joshua was a pacifist who despised the use of arms.
Susan.
Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah was seated next to Joshua, the son of a wealthy family and wealthy in his own right. He had achieved fame as a scholar before he turned 20. He was respected even by the Romans, having visited Rome as a member of a Jewish delegation. But despite his prominence in the community and despite his noble lineage, which he was able to trace back to Ezra the scribe, he was ever humble.
Baby.
Rabbi Akiba ben Joseph sat next to Eleazar. Akiba, the self-made scholar, who couldn't read a word until his 40th birthday. Akiba, the shepherd boy who became the leading light of his generation, supported the efforts of Bar Kokhba in his rebellion against Rome. He dared to defy the Roman decree to desist from teaching, and, as a result, suffered a violent martyr's death in the year 135.
Herb.
And next to Akiva was his former teacher, Rabbi Tarfon. Tarfon, the man of great wit and great wealth, who could be both vitriolic and gentle. The descendant of a priestly family, he had in his youth participated in the temple service. He had little patience with Jews whose loyalty to their faith wavered, but he was very understanding of the frailties of his fellow men.
All together.
Each of the five belonged from different backgrounds and molded by unequal circumstances, sat and debated the issue of freedom and tyranny. The night was going through the passage of the Messiah.
Dawn was approaching and the Christians arrived in decisive prayers. For sun and sea they were waiting. Five of the greatest scholars, the most precious It's not in the beginning, our ancestors were worshippers of idols, but when they realized the folly of their ways, the Lord drew them near to Him. Cesar.
What page?
In days of old, when our ancestors dwelt beyond the Euphrates River, Terah, the father of Abraham, served gods of good and sun. Abraham rebelled against the senseless practice of bowing down to the work of one's own hand, and he uprooted his family and moved to the land of Canaan. There he took unto himself Sarah as a wife, and their son Isaac was born unto him.
Isaac followed in the tradition of his father. Rebekah became his wife, and Jacob and Esau were the offspring of their marriage. Jacob followed in the tradition of his father and grandfather. He took unto himself Rachel and Leah as wives, and their handmaids were Bilhah and Zilpah. The offspring of his marriages totaled 12 sons and 1 daughter.
A great sorrow befell Father Jacob, where he lost his beloved son Joseph, who had been sold to a caravan of Ishmaelites by his jealous brothers. Jacob had been told by his sons that Joseph was dead, that he had been killed by a wild beast, and Jacob grieved deeply for his beloved son.
Once in Egypt, Joseph was resold as a slave to Potiphar, the vizier of Pharaoh and keeper of the palace. For many years, Joseph languished in prison until, through an act of providence, was able to display his wisdom to the butler of the king, who, like Joseph, was a prisoner. One day, after the king's butler had been freed and was restored to his post, Pharaoh was troubled by dreams that none of his wise men could interpret for him. It was then that the butler remembered Joseph, and he told the king about the imprisoned young Hebrew lad who had been successful in interpreting dreams.
Joseph was brought before the king, and he successfully interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. From that moment, Joseph rose in power and prestige. Pharaoh said to him, "You shall rule over my house, and to you all my people will pay homage. Only I and my throne will be more exalted than you."
Having reached this position, Joseph was now determined to bring his father from Canaan down to the land of Egypt. A dreadful famine had engulfed the land of Canaan, and only in the land of Egypt was food plentiful. After many trying and agonizing episodes, Joseph finally revealed himself to his brothers. Soon thereafter, Jacob and his family moved to Egypt. A special city was set aside for the family of Jacob, and it was named Goshen. In the city of Goshen, in the land of Egypt, Jacob and his offspring dwelled in peace and plenty.
70 persons had come down to Egypt with father Jacob, and soon they increased and multiplied. It was as if the land was filled with the descendants of Jacob. Before long, father Jacob died, and then Joseph died too. A new Pharaoh ascended the throne of Egypt. The new ruler viewed with apprehension the ever-increasing number of Hebrews who were becoming mighty and influential. He chose to forget Joseph and all that he had done to save Egypt in the years of this severe famine. Pharaoh said to his people, "Behold, the children of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Let us reconsider their position, lest they multiply even more and grow ever more powerful. Should a war come, it may very well be that they will join our enemies."
And so it was decreed that all Hebrews be carefully watched and their power curbed. Their newborn sons were to be drowned in the river so that the nation might not reproduce itself, and all adults were to become slaves of the crown. And so it happened that the children of Israel were forced into slavery, and for long hours each day they toiled in the fields, gathering straw and then making the bricks to build the great monuments and pyramids that were to attest to the eternity of the pharaohs.
But one Hebrew baby was stowed away among the reeds of the river. One day when the king's daughter went down to the river edge for her daily bath, she heard the cry of a young child and sent her handmaids to fetch it. And she loved the child and took him to the castle and called him Moses, meaning I drew him forth from the water. And in the protective custody for the oppressor himself, Moses, the son of a Hebrew, grew into manhood. And as he grew, so did his sympathy for the lost of his suffering people. In time he renounced his royal privilege and became the protagonist of his fellow Hebrews.